especially when none of these 67 smartphones belong to any of the Indian journalists who claim to have been snooped upon. It again kind of fortifies government's position that there is no such issue, and the opposition is kind of drum beating and kind of creating a mole out of nothing.
Namaste everybody. Welcome to Chitti Media. My name is Sharan Sethi, your host. In the last monsoon session of the parliament, we've seen how the opposition has continuously disrupted over one single issue. That was the issue of Pegasus. To discuss that with us today, we have a very good friend of mine from Bangalore. He is a commentator on current affairs topics, including politics, strategic affairs, and defense studies. Please welcome Kirti Joshi. Kirti Avre, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to having a show with you. And in fact, to discuss about something like Pegasus is in fact a privilege. At that note, let me actually wish you a happy Varmahalakshmi, and also ask you how you are doing, because we are living through a pandemic and I know that you're actively traveling these days.
Yeah, I'm managing as everybody else is managing. So we got to live with it. It's, we have kind of a lull period with respect to the number of cases. So I'm just utilizing it to, visit a few places. Of course, with the COVID appropriate behavior with the masks and with the social distancing on. And that's pretty much about it. I mean, it has now become the norm of life. So there's nothing new about it or to, ponder more about it. So, yeah.
Great. Absolutely. I'm glad that you and your family are very safe. Having said that, I'd like to move on to my first question with your permission.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, a lot of noise has been done around Pegasus, the whole issue of Pegasus. And in fact, there was a survey conducted very recently, and a majority of the people actually do not know what Pegasus issue is. They think that it is related to something else. It's out of bounds of even defense studies, right? That is the lack of awareness that we have. And I don't think even the opposition parties are even aware of what exactly a spyware is and how Pegasus actually works. So can you, to our viewers, in brief, explain what the entire scandal, quote unquote scandal, is about, and what the opposition stand is, and how the government has responded to it?
That's a pretty comprehensive question to begin, Sharon. And to just introduce or to just give a kind of a introduction to what Pegasus is for the dummies, it's a military grade spyware that is usually used by intelligence agencies to track, monitor, conduct surveillance on terrorists and major criminals who pose a threat to the security and the safety of the society. So this is the stated objective of NSO. So let me be very clear. NSO is the company which has prepared this spyware. It is called Pegasus, and the major clients, or to say the only kind of clients that NSO has, are the government agencies, and it also is mandatory and kind of a obligatory requirement on the part of NSO to always seek the approval of the Israeli government before it sells to any other law enforcement agency. And this being always a federal government, it kind of becomes intermediate government to government kind of a contract. With NSO on one side being approved by the Israeli government and the other federal government on the other side. So this is the slated application of this spyware, and this is the company which is making this spyware. So the issue per se kind of erupted or came to the limelight somewhere in mid-July, just about the time when the monsoon session was about to start here in India. So it was the structure of the study and the investigations were organized somewhat like this. So a non-profit, a journalism non-profit organization based out of Paris called as Forbidden Stories organized a conglomerate of journalists and it said that we have a list of 50,000 numbers that are potential targets for snooping and monitoring and surveilling using this spyware called Pegasus. So the entire setup itself was called as Pegasus Project. It was spearheaded by Forbidden Stories, and the technical assistance for proving any such charges was extended to Forbidden Stories by Amnesty International, the notorious human rights organization. And The Amnesty International's forensic lab itself was one of the primary contributors to the investigation. So the controversy per se in the Indian context is that a lot of numbers that were investigated out of this list of 50,000, some of these numbers were found to be of those journalists, human rights activists, politicians, majorly politicians who are in opposition in their respective countries. And it led to kind of a storm that Indian government under the Modi administration, they are kind of using this spyware to snoop on its potential opposition, and it's an abuse on the human rights and right to life, right to privacy, and things like this. So the opposition hooked on to this issue just because it kind of had no other legitimate issues to take up before the monsoon started, and like any other opposition project that they have taken up in last 6-7 years without any forethought or without any constructive protest constructive demand. They kind of jumped into this whole protest, and the only agenda, I would say, was to disrupt the parliament. Right. And they successfully did so, because you saw the productivity, which was somewhere in 120%, 119%, somewhere like that in previous sessions, dipped down to 28-29% in the last session. So it was kind of a totally disrupted monsoon session. But yeah, this in its in a nutshell, this was the this is the issue. Right. But if we go a little further and examine the veracity and the credibility of the claims itself that that the Pegasus project has put forth, it kinds of come across as something which is not corroborated with strong evidence, so as to pin the government of the day, and there's no smoking gun which can kind of implicate the Modi government today. So why was this whole issue kind of mindlessly perpetuated by the media, by the opposition, without actually having any credible evidence to put forth in front of the nation? This is one thing. The second part is the investigation that was conducted by Amnesty itself. So the Pegasus project that had a kind of a list of 50,000 numbers, they were able to track down about 1,000 of them, and about 67 of these users were kind of requested to submit their smartphones to further subject them to forensic analysis. Right. And out of the 67 phones that were kind of analyzed, only about 23 were found to be infected with this spyware. So the ratio itself is pretty skewed, right? You expect the number to be at least somewhere close to 67, because out of 50,000 you have narrowed down to 1,000, and out of 1,000 you have taken less than 1/10 the sample size, and you expect at least this to come out to be closer to 100% infectious devices. But it was not so, and only 23 smartphones were infected, and for the rest of them, they had a few traces of impregnation from the spyware, but there were never conclusive evidences to say that there was actual penetration of the spyware itself. So while I don't deny that there might be a possibility of these numbers to have gotten snooped upon, I don't see the relevance in the Indian context, and especially when none of these 67 smartphones belong to any of the Indian journalists who claim to have been snooped upon. It again kind of fortifies government's position that there is no such issue, and the opposition is kind of drumbeating and kind of creating a mole out of nothing. So this is how the controversy has panned out in last 1.5 month, and the government is now saying that uh, although there have been multiple instances, the very first week of the parliament session, the government kind of made it very clear when Ashwini Vaishnaw, the Minister for IT, he very clearly laid out that government has always kind of focused and restricted itself to using legal instruments for monitoring and surveilling potential threats to society. This is a statement which in itself should have been enough for the opposition, because when you say that we are only using the already established legal instruments, it means that you can't possibly take help of a foreign spyware. But having said that, these are some of the decisions that are taken in confidentiality and not in as much public glare as other decisions of the government happen. So, having said that, the government is now saying that they are open for a Supreme Court monitored probe into this whole row. So that is the kind of confidence that the government has to say that we haven't really snooped on people using a spyware technology that is foreign to our land and that has no legal regulation or any kind of approval from the Indian enforcement agencies to usually use this as an instrument to spy on people. So this is in a nutshell the crux of the whole issue. And opposition, like always, they have kind of disrupted the parliament. The monsoon session has ended. Now they don't know where to go, and that is the state of affairs today.
Right. I'm glad you brought these points up. And it's very interesting because since there is a lot of hue and cry, especially in some certain sections of the media, if we closely were to investigate the entire issue, there are a lot of confusing and ambiguous reports that emerge, Kirtiji, because some sections of the media have a different type of a different reflects a different version of what the NSO has been saying. So, what is the truth, and what has the NSO told with regard to India, especially? What is the statement that the NSO has given out?
Yeah, so NSO hasn't really said anything specific to India, but it has definitely reacted to the issue and the Pegasus project itself. I mean, for the very starters, it has categorically denied any links and said that all these 50,000 numbers has nothing so whatsoever got to do with the spyware technology that it has developed. So that itself is a blanket statement to start with. It has said that these 50,000 numbers aren't associated with the company's spyware technology. But having said that, we can't ask the thief if he has stolen something, right? So what do we know further about the NSO's actions? We know that the NSO regularly conducts a rigorous kind of a study on all of its clients, and wherever there are allegations of human rights abuse, it has terminated contracts multiple times in the past. So the transparency and responsibility record that is published by NSO, it speaks of such instances where it has discontinued the contracts because there were abuse in the terms of the contract, and it has shut down the systems of some of its clients. And just in the last 12 months, it has terminated contracts of two major clients. This is what the report says. And to do so, to always have a kind of a check on the the bona fide intentions of its clients, it conducts a rigorous due diligence activity within the organization. And the report says that it has lost close to $100 million in revenue because the cost of due diligence is such. So you have a number of things that have come out of NSO's press releases, and the CEO himself has categorically denied, as I told you. And that said, it is again to be perfectly to give benefit of doubt to the other side also. We can't take it for face value. But then when we see people who are accusing such things, Amnesty, for example, I mean, I can't even start to count the number of instances it has tried to play wrong ball with the Indian society and Indian government in general. For example, they are accused of FCRA violations of to the tune of 51 crores in India. So who do you believe more, habitual offender or somebody who has bona fide intentions, or at least says so? Because the objective of the NSO, as they state in their website, is to provide federal governments with enough resources to avert any security situations and help the government in maintaining law and order. So yeah, this is pretty much the state of it. And as I said, the story cannot be written off completely, because the phones that were diagnosed with the spyware, the 23 phones that actually showed hints of impregnation of the spyware, these were independently also verified by University of Toronto. There's a research group called Citizens Lab. They have kind of peer reviewed the research and the analysis, and they have kind of confirmed that there must be some actors who are kind of spying on these numbers. So everything said and done, this is a whole new world of technology and largely unregulated. The spyware investigations across the world do not have any do not have any sovereign boundaries, right? Because you can't really put a boundary to cyber technology. So it's a new issue. The technologies are developing, and so the laws also must catch up. But so far there is no smoking gun, and for that reason there is no credible evidence on part of the opposition to stall the to hold the government responsible for spying on its own citizens.
I'm really glad you're bringing up the issue of credibility when the
Yes.
opposition is raising this.
Yes.
Because if we were to look at the history of snooping and snooping
Yes.
laws in India, phone tapping was almost a common thing. It was emulated even in popular, in pop culture. So everybody knows that the governments, whichever government they are, has spied at some point or the other on its political opponents. So since you have been digging deep into this issue, whatever you're aware about the snooping history in India, could you please share that with our viewers as well?
There have been always legal provisions to tap phones, at least. That is, earlier the tapping of telegrams was to happen. The 1885, the Telegraph Act of 1885 empowers the state to monitor and intercept telegrams. That is how it started. And from there onwards, there have been multiple revisions to the telegraph rules. Telegraph rules of 1951, for example, again empowers the state. There is Section 2 of Indian Telegraph Act of 1885, as I already said. And the recently amended the telegraph rules of amendment bill in 2007, I guess. Yeah, that again further empowers the state to have more powers to snoop on potential threats to the society. IT Act of 2000, the Section 69, the famous Section 69 of IT Act, that again lays out provisions. But each of the recommendations and the legal provisions that are in place to do the snooping are kind of robust, I would say. Because this is the premises on which the minister addressed the House, that the government hasn't gone beyond the legally available provisions and protocols to snoop on somebody. So the law is so robust, it just doesn't tell you about who authorizes or on whom the spying should happen. It also talks about the way in which the snooping orders are to be executed, the duration for which the snooping can be done, the the collection of the data of the snooping. It's creating an archive out of it, and mandatory destruction of the data after a certain point. All these things and the mandatory obligations on part of intermediaries as well, a part of setting up a review committee to look at these interception rules every now and then. There is a periodic oversight, and all these things are kind of so robust. And at each phase, you have to have the agency, whichever is willing to spy on people. It has to write a authorization slip and this has to be authorized by the if the state government wants to snoop on somebody, it has to be authorized by the state home secretary, or if at the union level, it has to be authorized at the union home secretary level. So there are robust protocols. But having said that, the opposition is kind of, it has no real moral standing, because the 10 agencies that are authorized to snoop today in India, they were kind of authorized to do so in 2009 by UPA to government, right? You have ED, you have NIA, you have CBI, you have Central Board of Direct Tax Collection, and so all these agencies have been notified by 2009 order under PM Manmohan Singh. So that is where the authorization for these 10 agencies come from. Second thing is, in 2011, the Cabinet Committee on Security, again under the Prime Ministership of Manmohan Singh, cleared a project called Central Monitoring System, that kind of laid out the different ways in which the calls and the messages can be intercepted. Not just the calls and messages, but also your computers. This was brought for the very first time by the UPA government itself. And at one point, a 2013 RTI revealed that close to 9,000 calls and 500 messages were snooped upon every month. So you see, so many people were snooped upon every month, and that was the kind of activity which was going on in 2013, just before Modi came to power. So by stretch of imagination, you can say the government was smelling the coffee, and they were aware of the increasing popularity of the opposition, and probably they were spying on the opposition itself, because 9,000 phone calls is pretty disproportionate, to snoop on somebody and conduct your surveillance. But beyond that, I think to give force to these notifications that have come at different points in the UPA era, and also strengthening of the IT Act itself, it has proceeded well under the current administration. And now we have come to a point where giving some kind of teeth to these regulations has become really necessary, because I don't rule out the fact that there might have been some kind of a snooping by an external agency on Indian citizens. This is still a possibility. And because the people who kind of created a uproar in the parliament, outside of the parliament, the journalists who said that their phones have been tapped since forever, none of them came forward and submitted their device for forensic analysis. So there is no credibility to their accusations, because any kind of opposition, they would realize that the easiest way to pin down the government of the day is to prove scientifically through forensic analysis that your phone was tapped, right? Yes. And if it was indeed tapped by spyware that has its origins in a foreign land, it becomes all the more important for the government to ensure that the citizens and the digital sovereignty of the country is not disturbed or encroached upon. So this has been the tale of opposition, and they don't know what to do. I mean, a responsible opposition would have pressed for bringing out the data protection bill, which talks about data localization and having some kind of features in your smartphones that prohibits the snooping. For example, one thing that I read during my research was that US numbers were out of the purview of this spyware technology. So it is kind of funny, because they have their own protocols for communication and telecommunication. So these are the things we should be speaking about as a nation, as the opposition of the country, and I don't see that happening.
I think you're raising some very pertinent questions, but we'll end this with my last question. Regardless of who is in power, in a general sense, there is a sense that cyber warfare technologies are extremely capable these days, and it's across. It's a pan-governmental thing, right? Like the Israelis are good with it, the Chinese are really good with it, the Americans are good with it. So everybody are strengthening their own capabilities. So yes, obviously giving the benefit of the doubt to the people and to the opposition, what is the way forward, and how can the opposition and the political opponents and the common man know that they're not being spied upon unnecessarily?
This is a very comprehensive question again, Sharon, and I'm afraid I'm not the expert to talk on this. It requires expertise, domain expertise to comment on these things. But some of the obvious things that the opposition must have pressed the comment on was data protection laws, for example, the cyber security law. And I must credit the government because back in 2020 itself, if you listen to Prime Minister Modi's Independence Day speech of 2020, you see him talking on threats arising out of the cyberspace. And he even went on to say that India is soon going to have a robust cybersecurity law. So the government is obviously thinking on all these grounds, and the kind of grants that they are providing to different agencies, for example, are good indicators that government is serious. The statement from Prime Minister himself on his Independence Day speech, it shows that there is a lot of seriousness in the power corridors about the issues coming out of cyber threats. And it is relatively new field, and we need expert hands to work on this topic. I'm hopeful that government is already working on it. But as I said, these things must be expedited as early as possible because the threats are dynamic and you never really know what would come up tomorrow. The French president was allegedly snooped upon using the same spyware. So we do not want such things to happen to our prime minister or to our politicians, regardless of which party they belong to. So the way forward really is the money that should go into funding the research to know better these technologies and also create that hardware infrastructure inside the ecosystem within the country to deploy some of the resources, because at the end of the day there might be cyber security technologies that might affect us. At the same time, are your hardware robust enough and are they secure enough to kind of avert such kind of attempts to penetrate your device? All these things are they require a large group of experts to come together, and I'm definitely not one of them. But I think these are generally the lines in which I think we should progress towards finding a resolution.
Absolutely, those are some very, very interesting points you've raised. And Kirtiji actually says that the opposition is pointing cannons at an issue that is perhaps a non-issue, and the timing and the reason and the credibility of the opposition is questionable, because in the past they've been raising they've been sort of making laws that goes against the general cybersecurity of the citizens themselves. These are some very pertinent questions you've raised, and I'm really glad you could join us today for a very discussion. We do hope that you will join us for future discussions as well. Thank you so much, Kirtiji. Namaskara.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sharan. It was good to be on the show, and I look forward to more discussions on your channel by other experts as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, it was great hosting you too. Thank you so much. And to all of viewers watching this, please do share, like, and subscribe. Again, this is your host, Sharan Sethi, signing off.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.